Now, the aerials that can be used on kites as beginners really are a couple of them. One is just a simple wire, either dropped down from the kite or actually used as the flying line of the kite. And the one that I would prefer, and I would suggest that we look at in more detail, a doublet. Okay, just dealing with the simple wire first. The length of wire can be anything you like, but what you've got to remember, of course, is you're up against a 200-foot ceiling for your kite. So if you're going to use just a wire dropped off the kite, then it can only be 200 feet long. Or if you're going to use electric fencing wire like this as a flying line and an aerial, you're probably faced with something like 250 feet, bearing in mind that the kite probably runs at an angle of about 50 degrees. So, I mean, you can use single wires. I often do myself. If I do use a single wire, which is very convenient sometimes, they're very quick and easy to put up, it will be 5/8 of a wave of wire, 5/8 wavelength long. In the case of 80 meters, that's 175 feet. I use 5/8 of a wave because you can then run against ground, and being mainly voltage fed, you don't need so many radials, and of course the radiating part of the aerial is well up in the air. However, by far and away the more useful aerial to use is the doublet, such as we see on the floor here, because that can be used sloping with a single kite and tethered at the bottom. It can be used in the form of an inverted V, or even it can be strung out horizontal to the ground using a couple of kites. So that's the one that we're going to look at in detail. I'm going to make an 80-meter doublet like this one. It's a very useful aerial because if you choose to feed it with 75 ohm wire, as I'm doing on this, you can actually get it to go on several different bands. It could of course be fed with coax, no problem in that, except that with the kites that I'm going to show you, they may struggle a bit to lift the weight of the coax. So for a number of reasons, weight and the fact that you can get the aerial to go on different bands, I would suggest that we look at an 80-meter doublet. The dimensions of the doublet are 66 foot on each leg and 150 feet of feeder from the centre. So we'll proceed to work on that basis. Now, just looking at the electric fencing in detail, I say this is so happens this is tinned copper wire, 200-pound breaking strain, which is perfectly adequate for the doublet that we're going to make, and on the kites that we're going to look at a bit later. You'll notice in order to attach it to the centerpiece, what I've done is teased out the strands of wire, twisted them together, and just cut off the excess of the polypropylene string. Centerpiece is very simple, just one of those simple, fairly cheap dog bone plastic insulators, quite strong enough. Obviously you can use other sorts of things if you want, but these work extremely well. And what I'm going to do is tie the electric fencing to the rings on the dog bone. The feeder I'm using is 75 ohm speaker wire, very readily obtainable from any number of sources. 100 meter reel is probably 10 and 12 pounds. It doesn't have to be very expensive or exotic. Any sort of stranded feeder will do. You can use the solid stuff, but it does stand a chance of breaking. I prefer to use the stranded type of speaker wire. The feeder is just simply looped around the dog bone, just taped, as you can see there, and a long slack tail goes to the wire tail of the arm of the aerial, where it's twisted together. And if it's actually tinned copper wire like this, you can solder it twist it around the aerial arm as I've done there, and just simply tape it together for neatness. Right, here is an 80-metre doublet made up, and on the bottom is a 1-to-1 balun. Not strictly necessary, you could go straight into the matching unit. I suggest you still use some sort of matching unit so that you can make the 80-metre doublet go on 40 and 20, and indeed of course you have that all important earth resistor to take the static off of the aerial.